Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Kodiak, back for another video, and I'm very excited because today we are talking about the Nighthold. Guys, the magic is real, the feelings of a new raid are flooding back, and I gotta tell you guys, it feels really, really good. It feels so good because whenever new content comes out, whether you're a hardcore raider or a casual raider, it evokes this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of inspiration, this feeling of excitement that you literally cannot wait to do this new stuff, this new progression, this new raid, whatever you get out of the game, you just excited to do this new content. And I can tell you from my experience last night with Exiled Power, everybody was on the edge of their seats the entire time. The excitement was honestly almost palpable throughout the night. People were, chiming in here, chiming in there, just sharing their enthusiasm for the new raid and the new content. We were doing normal run that afternoon, yesterday afternoon, and one of our newer priests, who's actually now one of our senior raiders, Zadefin, messaged me and he said, man, I don't do this for the gear. I don't do this for anything other than the progression, the new experience of killing a boss. And that's what I, as a raid leader, try to instill upon the raiders, and everybody in Exile Power is on the same page. Like, we just want to kill bosses. We want to do the newest content and have a blast doing it. And I have to say, there were so many high points last night with the Nighthold. And the first one I want to talk about is the feeling of awe where you're finally in a raid that feels like a raid. Back in like the days of Icecrown Citadel and Black Temple, when you walked into a zone and you felt like it was larger than life. And that is one of the coolest feelings in the world. Whether you've played, 8-bit games or whatever, or you played 3D games or whatever you're playing, there is a feeling that you get whenever you play a game that you cannot describe to somebody that's a non-gamer, because there's this feeling of awe that comes over you. This feeling that hits you like a ton of bricks when you realize things are bigger than they seem. And that's how I felt with the Nighthold, especially when I got up to going towards the Spellblade. We're kind of on the Grand Promenade there, where you're fighting these waves of mobs and everything is just massive. The scale is massive. Everything feels larger than life, and that is a huge high point for me. I didn't feel that in the Emerald Nightmare, and I kind of felt that in TOV, but I really consider TOV to be a transitionary raid, and although the bosses were kind of larger than life, the content itself didn't feel larger than life. There's something about the density, the scale, the ominence of the Nighthold that really hit a lot of the raiders to our cores, because you get in there and you just know. You know that something epic is going to happen. You know this is going to be a journey that's going to take months. And it especially solidifies that feeling when you're doing encounters that really engage you as a team and as an individual. And honestly, that's another one of my high points, guys. We loved the fights. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people will say, oh, they were so vanilla, they were so boring. And then you can talk to other people who say, oh my god, they were so incredible. I am in the camp of I had a blast last night. And I'll tell you why. Mechanics are very tough to design, right? We see that with raids going all the way back to, Molten Core, where things were so vanilla, so basic, dodge this, dodge that. There was no interplay between abilities. Abilities didn't really change and augment throughout a fight. They just kind of were abilities. And that's one of the things that Blizz has slowly been building up from tier to tier, expansion to expansion. And finally, we're in the Nighthold, where each boss brings something different to the table. And I'm not saying that these are wildly out of the box things that we haven't seen before, because most of the boss mechanics that you could conceive in your head, Blizzard has done in some fashion or another. And I'm sure there's some ingenious people out there that watch this channel that could be like, oh, I have this great idea for a boss ability. And I'm sure it would be a really cool boss ability, but Blizz has done this thing where they've stepped it up once again. And if you look at all of the encounters on paper, you'll notice that a lot of the abilities interplay very well together, whether it be from augmenting an ability from phase to phase, or just abilities that kind of lock together and cement an encounter. They've done this great job of gluing all of the bosses together. Things don't feel disconnected. Ability A interacts with ability B, which interacts with ability C, which may change drastically depending on what phase you're in. And this is a perfect example in the Spellblade encounter. One of actually my favorite encounters so far. Granted, we are only on normal, guys. We haven't done that much of the fight, but this is just a first impressions video. Please take everything with a grain of salt. Just some opinions I wanted to share with you guys, and listen to what you guys thought about your first experiences in the Nighthold. But going back to the Spellblade really quick, you have 3 phases, right? You have a Frost phase, a Fire phase, and an Arcane phase. And within each of those phases, abilities augment. You get the initial ability, and then it replicates, and you have to deal with it 5 or 6 more times on 5 or 6 different people. And then that ability detonates, and something new happens with the ability. It changes, and it changes. And then you finally have the animate phase where the ability takes a completely new direction. Ads come out, you have to deal with them. Obviously, you're dealing with them differently depending on what difficulty you're in. But that's just a great way of showing how Blizz is stepping up each of the abilities within an encounter and making them all relevant to each other. And that's really, really cool. I truly appreciate that. And honestly, it kind of drove me nuts because during our midday run, where we were just kind of getting some exposure to the raid, we got stuck on Croesus for a little bit. And it's funny because on paper, Croesus is one of the most simplistic bosses possible. And later that night, we did one-shot it, which felt really good, obviously. But it's one of the most simplistic bosses possible. And when you finally get to him and you finally, you do the encounter, you kind of breathe this sigh of relief, because it's kind of a throwback to like the older days of WoW, where abilities were just cut and dry, straightforward. You react to ability A this way, you react to ability B this way, and if you mess it up, you kind of snowball and things get out of control. And that's kind of nice. It's kind of nice that Blizz will throw back to their past and say, look, this worked before, it's going to work now. And I really appreciate that, because it makes me think that at least in the raid design environment, the raid team, whoever designs these things has a good head on their shoulders. Whoever's leading that team really understands the true nature of raid environment and PvE content. And it's really the reason why I still play this game. Other than Exiled Power and the people that I've met along the way, the reason I play this game is for the content, and the raid content specifically. It's just second to none. I've played a few other MMOs. I've played Star Wars: The Old Republic. I've played WildStar. And there's just nothing that holds a candle to WoW. And I've had conversations with raiders where they'll say, oh God, it's so vanilla, it's so basic. And yeah, that may be true, but then every guild, if it was so basic, every guild should be at that, top end mythic level. If everything is so basic and so simple, it must be so easy for everybody to get there. And that's not the case. And there's some magic ingredient that Blizzard puts into their PvE raid content that you just can't quantify. It's just a magical, magical experience. So let's talk about some of the things that maybe I didn't like, or maybe you didn't like. Obviously, when you're focused on killing bosses, anytime you wipe to ads, it sucks. It's part of the magic, it's part of the learning experience, and I think after a certain period of time, once everything is we're focused on progression, and especially mythic boss progression, moving from boss to boss may either be a hindrance and you'll kind of get annoyed of it, or you'll appreciate it for the space it offers between progression. And this is really going to depend on you as a player. If you like that break between bosses, if you think that you should have to kill a little bit of trash because it adds to the lore element of things and you really enjoy that. Or you can be like some of the more cutting edge players and you really enjoy just going from boss to boss and really not worrying about the trash, because in your head it just adds 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And I can understand that perspective as well. I can see it being both a good thing or a bad thing depending on what type of guild and raid team you guys run. One of the other things that I felt was a little bit, it wasn't bad by any means, but I just thought that going into the raid, you kind of had these bosses that rolled over right away. And now I understand that I'm coming from an interesting place. Like I get in there in normal and I expect these bosses to die quickly. But, they shouldn't be non-challenging. They should have a challenge aspect to it. There were a lot of bosses in there that night that we kind of read on paper, figured out what we wanted to do in our heads, and then pretty much just kind of flew by the seat of our pants and did just okay. We did just fine. We got through the content, no big deal. And there's an argument to be made here. You're a Mythic guild, you're focused on Mythic, your goal is not to stick in normal, and I totally understand that. But there may be some guilds that did struggle on the normal content, and that's okay too. I just wish that some of the abilities that were in some of the fights, especially the earlier fights, packed a little bit more of a punch. Chromatic Anomaly, for one example, seems like a really interesting fight, and I'm sure it will be on Heroic and Mythic difficulty. But on paper, it seemed kind of, all right, man, you got different time phases. Things are going to get nutty really quick. And nothing really had an impact in that fight. You could run through things, you could, take your time killing ads, and it just kind of felt meh. And for a new raid, I kind of wanted to see a little bit more punch behind some of those abilities. Again, this is completely subjective. You guys may love that that's the case and you could just rickroll through 10 bosses, and that's fine. It's just my personal opinion. And you may share a wildly different one than me, and that's completely fine. That's what we're here for. But overall, guys, I really had a blast, especially when you got up to some of the bosses like Tichondrius and Star Augur. We got to Star Augur, and this is 100% on me. I looked at the fight, and I didn't get it on paper. I looked at a few different guides. I didn't understand it on paper. And then it's one of those classic examples when you get into the encounter and you overthink it like crazy. You just get there and you're like, oh my god, this makes so much more sense. We should have just pulled it. Didn't spend enough time, I guess, looking at it beforehand. But with 10 bosses, there's almost only so much work I can put in with a real life, a job, a fiance, all of that good stuff. So one of those things, definitely for other raid leaders out there, sometimes you just have to pull the boss. Sometimes there's only so much you can comprehend. And look, maybe this is a knock on me. Maybe I'm not the best raid leader in the world, and I'll freely admit that. But there's just so much that you can comprehend, and there's only so much information you can take in. Especially when tensions are high, everybody's anxious to, all right, pull the boss, pull the boss. Sometimes you do. You just have to pull the boss. And I go back to one of the points I've made in previous videos. You have to surround yourself with good people. Being in a raid last night, brand new content, 10 new bosses to kill, was only enjoyable because I was surrounded by 25 people that I enjoy playing with. Every single pull was an enjoyable experience. I wasn't rattling on my team because, this person isn't playing up to standard, or this person is just absolutely botching mechanics. No, we've done such great work recruiting quality players, quality people to the guild, and that's really important, guys. And if there's anything I can stress about guild management and building a team, it's that. Surround yourself with good players, good officers, and good people. That is the core of a good guild, is the players. And I cannot say that enough, how enjoyable it was to get in there with my team after months and months of building up and rotating new players in and old players out and all of this good stuff. Had an absolute blast with this new content. And look, I could talk for hours. I mean, we're already coming up onto the almost to 15 minutes here, and I don't want to harp on too long about each boss because we're going to be doing some more videos about each of the bosses, different guide videos, things like that. But I really want to know what you guys thought. What was your favorite boss in the instance? What were some of the things you liked? Some of the things you didn't like? Just paint me a picture, paint everybody a picture of how your first night in Nighthold was, because we've been getting a lot of really great comments on some of our videos, and I want to keep that discussion going moving forward. This is all about the community. This channel started because of the community and our efforts to bridge the gap between maybe Mythic raiders and casual raiders, and just kind of have a conversation about the content in World of Warcraft. There's plenty of other channels out there. We appreciate you guys coming to the Exiled Power channel. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video if you liked it, and please, please, please drop us a line. Let us know what you thought of the Nighthold raid. Very eager to see how everybody's first experiences were. But for now, guys, my name is Kodiak. We have much more content coming your way in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, for now, this has been Kodiak with another Exiled Power video. We'll see you next time.